there's a lot of these other issues, Jamie, that are coming up. It's kind of scary when you follow those social media feeds. There's a lot of other issues that have been lying dormant for a long time, and in a lot of instances for a good reason. But the Democrats they had floundered. It's not easy being in charge, and the coalitions being elected these days are divided on both sides. The Republicans have hardcore MAGA types and more mainstream GOP traditional. The Democrats have more union-oriented members, but then a section of progressive members who refuse to vote for things. So they refuse to show up for work and say they're not getting the progressive agenda they want. All those people have a right to want their own agenda, but the Democrats have had the hardest time holding them together as a whole. They only had a 2-vote majority in the House. They had a hard time passing bills for a long time. And I actually think the Detroit mayoral race is playing a role here too, not a major one, but it's there because should Speaker Joe Tate actually follow through and run for mayor, he's going to want to have some things that he said he accomplished. And suddenly time is running out for him to do that. So we're seeing a lot of bills move.
Well, but he also wants to make sure that he doesn't hack off maybe union folks that can be a great source of funding for his forthcoming mayoral campaign, too. John, the other thing, they talk about transparency, and boy, did this hack me off yesterday. There's apparently some motion on it, but they won't make the transparency rules, the Freedom of Information Act. It won't be subject to the governor or the legislators until sometime in 2027, long after Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who said she was going to do this, has left the field of battle, or most of these legislators who are going to be term limited out. What a bunch of weasels.
I have to agree with you on that one. Frankly, I really don't know what the fear is there. It's comes from a point of weakness, that's for sure, or it can be something much worse. I worked in all parts of state government, and I worked in the governor's office. I worked in the legislature, where a lot of people get comfortable thinking, oh, whatever email I fire off, it can't be FOIA'd, so I don't need to worry about what I'm doing here. But when I worked for the Attorney General's office, when you're in the rest of state government, most people don't know this. If you're in one of the departments, you are subject to FOIA. So we knew that we had whatever we wrote was going to be potentially in the public's eye. And sometimes people still wrote stupid things and it ended up in the public eye. It was my job to explain it all when I worked for those departments. It really isn't that hard. And so I usually just say, well, what are you being so chicken for? But when you've already got 6 years under your belt in the legislature and you've done all these memos and wrote all these emails, you're not too interested in being on the playing field when this goes into effect. And I think folks like Senator Moss, who are just trying the hardest to get this thing to pass, they're going to be willing to accept a later start date just to finally make it happen. And it should happen. Anybody that works in the governor's office or in the legislature can handle being subjected to FOIA. There might need to be some privacy limitations for certain constituent stuff, but it's really not that hard. That's my personal message about it. I've lived through it. And the public deserves to know what they're paying for.
Beth LeBlanc tweeted out that the House Labor Committee, this Jim Headsma from Battle Creek, said there won't be testimony on several bills before them, just a referral out of the committee to the House floor. Is this regular stuff that happens at the end of lame duck, or is this new?
I would argue that it is kind of regular stuff that happens in lame duck, but that doesn't make it a good thing. There's a standard procedure in place where bills can be moved out of committee without a vote. It's not used very often. It's called a discharge motion, and it does severely limit the ability to have discussion on bills. But like I said at the beginning of the call, when we think about the Democrats finally realized there's literally only a handful of days where they have complete control of things. They've got giant wish lists that people are pushing for, and it just becomes a timing issue because there's, for example, something called the 5-day rule in the Constitution to try to increase transparency. If you need 5 days for a bill to move from the House to the Senate or vice versa, you've got to hurry up and get it out the door, because if they don't do it now, Christmas and New Year's are here. And so even though Democrats have realized they have a limited amount of time to take advantage of their majority, they all also want to leave. So there's a limit to how excited they're going to get over the next few days. So we are going to probably see even more discharge motions. It's happened in the past. It's not totally unusual. And it is a legitimate procedure, but it's usually used for an emergency, not just to move through massive changes in policy that will have a decades-long impact potentially on state government finances and our taxes.
Not everything is bad. There is some motion on carbon capture legislation. We're going to have to talk about that at a later date. Important technology as it relates to the climate, but also to manufacturing. John, we'll have to do that at a later time. But thanks for your insights this morning. We appreciate it.
Sure thing. And I just advise you, Jamie, just put the social media down. Don't look for a couple days. Take a break.
I want to see what they're up to over there.
Yeah. Honest to goodness, it's the only way you find out.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, John. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Coming up, General Motors cutting its losses in so many different areas. China, robo-taxis, laying off 1,000 out at the tech center. What's it all about? Are they getting ready for perhaps an economic hurricane that we're not aware of? We'll talk about that with Keith Naughton next. JR Morning, 649.